Hello, my name is Julia Lohmann. I'm professor of practice in contemporary design at Aalto University, and I'm going to speak about the knowing, caring, and acting framework that I'm using when I'm getting into a situation where I'm trying to understand a complex situation that I would like to change for a preferred one. In 2007, I was artist in residence in Japan, and I was looking at man and marine life and how we use the sea to sustain ourselves. I fell madly in love with seaweed that I found at the fish market. And in that moment, I believed that there would be a craft around it that I'm just simply not aware because I'm a European. But when I heard that it had been framed as food for thousands of years and that there was no kind of leather or other craft applications, I set out to develop them. The reason why I loved seaweed so much is that it grows up to 30 centimeters long, wide and 6 meters long in just one growth season. And while it grows, it actually benefits the ocean around it. It creates shelter for the fish and crustaceans. It is a habitat builder that is able to actually counteract our human deeds. So when we imbalance an ecosystem by, for example, putting too many nutrients into the seaweed is able to pull it out. This fascinated me so much because it offered the possibility to actually get a resource for humanity, not to the detriment of an ecosystem, but by benefiting it, by growing seaweed where it can actually help the ecosystem. Here you see a seaweed grown on a line in Sea Farm in Western Sweden. And as it hangs over a sandy sea bottom, it creates a habitat where it might be too deep for seaweed to naturally occur, for example. So it's actually allowing us to unlock and make viable living spaces in areas where previously there was not much life possible. Here you see me harvesting it. Seaweed is known for its umami flavor, for it enriching all the other flavors of a soup. But I saw that it actually does the same in a social situation. The minute there is seaweed on the table, people get super engaged. They want to touch it. They want to tell about their childhood memories. They have all of the emotions as well as their intellect activated by just having this very sensual, multisensorial relationship to a non-human being, to the algae. And that happens even if the algae has been dried up for a long time, and even if it's not alive anymore, because it is so evocative and vibrant in its materiality that it still evokes that reaction of being faced with another being. I wanted to explore this, and as part of my PhD, I founded the Department of Seaweed, a collective of people who want to work sustainably with algae. Here we are in the Victoria and Albert Museum, where I had a residency for half a year, and I placed seaweed up there with the other materials that have or have had a department at the Victoria and Albert Museum: glass, silverware, ceramics, and metal. What I found was that it's a lot richer if we co-speculate together with others about possible futures with seaweed or with any other material of any kind. So the idea is that instead of me imagining something and communicating it to others, I'm creating a lens through which we can all relate and think about what futures are desirable, where we're heading, what might the dangers be, and where are we going. Each and everyone from their own very specific angle. And that richness of angles actually allows us to come up with a much more complex and much more knowledgeable idea of what that future might hold. And not only can we imagine the future together, we can start building it step by step, putting together science and crafts and art, politics, and seeing where the knowledge gaps are, seeing how we have to relate to one another, to not just unlock a world in which we can use seaweed as a material for making, but also actually change and shift our mindset. Let the algae enable us to be a less destructive species. How do we get from an extractive, destructive mindset to a regenerative one, where we are keen to enhance the ecosystems that we are working with, where we have this idea of mutual benefits to the sea and ourselves. This is why my work links with eco-literacy, with ocean literacy, and with this kind of relation to non-humans, trying to understand seaweedness, trying to understand the agency of the organism in its ecosystem, to then know how and when and under which circumstances to work with it. Where should the seaweed that I work with be grown? How should it be grown? How can it have the best benefit? And how can I not kind of lose the benefit when scaling this use of seaweed, but actually scale the benefit with it? I realized that biomaterials are more than just materials. They become our familiar spirits, and they, now I have to change the slide, impact all aspects of the creative process. So that means that we actually enable them to shape what we're making as well as we shape it. It's a negotiation. It's a correspondence, as Tim Ingold would call it, between an organism, a material, and a maker. In the Victoria and Albert Museum, we ended up building the Okinaga node, a big sculpture that is oozing seaweedness. Between each of the rattans is a piece of seaweed that dries as it shapes, and it shapes kind of the whole form. It shrinks into a space. All the lines are done with rattan and some of the rings with aluminium. And here you see how the piece looked a couple of years later when all the chlorophyll had faded under the UV light into a light yellow color. I want to leave you with one last thought or kind of method that I'm using when I'm engaging in these complex situations, when I'm thinking of how to act, how to work with people, how to create these situations where we can have a mindset shift. And I developed this knowing, acting, and caring framework. It is an enactment of the head, heart, and hand model that's used in transformational change management and transformative learning. But basically, it sits within the community. So when I get into a situation, I'm asking myself, what are we knowing? And I try to map this out. Who is caring and what are we caring about? How are we acting? And then I try to find kind of the strength and weaknesses of this system. Are we not acting enough? Do we not know how to act? Do we not know enough? Or do we know and we could act, but we don't care enough? And then I try to kind of develop this step by step by bringing in different knowledges, by enabling people to have agency or by kind of building empathy and care in that system. If only two of these elements are present, our endeavor will fail. If knowing and caring is strong, but there is no agency, it means that we'll end up having eco-anxiety, despairing at the situation that we see that is affecting us, but not knowing what to do. If knowing and acting is present, but the framing of care is not broad enough, that we only care for our family, or only care for our corporation or our shareholders, or only care for the humans that are alive now, rather than the other beings we share the ecosystem with or future generations, that means that we'll act selfishly and that we will not kind of look far enough. And that might mean that we work very well as a corporation, but at the detriment of further future generations or other beings that we share the ecosystem with. If caring and acting are present without enough knowledge, it means that our agency will go in the wrong direction. It means that we need to bring, for example, science in to actually understand how we are affecting a process, or bring social science in to see whether our actions that might be driven by despair, what kind of effect they actually have on the wider community. How can we actually act so that we engage other people, that we don't shut them out, for example? That would be a question here. So only when the three are present, we can build into a different situation. It's almost like a scaffolding that allows us to reflect further and to understand what and who we have to bring together and how to work towards the situation that makes more sense for us. So I think creative practices are this connecting agent between knowing, acting, and caring, building possibilities, building bridges between disciplines, enabling empathy to grow, for example, when working with scientists, seeing what the strengths of a system are and seeing where the weaknesses lie, and then reaching out to other people, to other kind of scenarios, or bringing in creative methods to actually unlock what might be working better. So to bring in what's missing in the current situation. And this relates a lot to regenerative and multi-species design, to earth-centric practices, ecoliteracy, and biophilia. And I've placed here a list of links for you. If you want to have some further readings, then you can follow these. Thank you very much.